Hey everyone, this is Howie Ree, and this is our introduction to search funds with Michael Mazzeo and Clayton Collins. Clayton went to Fuqua, Michael went to Duke, and both have been doing search funds for several years now. And they want to give a brief overview as to kind of what they've done, but also to kind of demystify search funds for folks and to help people determine whether or not this is a path that they want to go on. So guys, thanks for joining in. And Michael, we'll start with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and how you got into search funds?
Sure. So I graduated from Duke, Trinity in 2011 with an economics, BS in economics. Started my career initially at a company at Goldman Sachs, and then moved to a company called TradeWeb, which is now filing for to be publicly listed on NASDAQ. It's an electronic trading platform. There I met my business partner, Elliot Luchansky, who went to Columbia Business School and had a leadership role at TradeWeb. We decided in 2013 that we would like to explore a partnership in search funds. He introduced the concept to me, and in 2014 we pulled the trigger, and that's when I met Clayton at one of the industry events, and we formed Elm Equity Partners together and searched for businesses to acquire, and the end of 2015 acquired InSync and Cloud Runner under the CloudX platform of technologies, and they are leading hosting and software businesses for small and medium-sized companies.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the intro. And Clayton,
I think we actually met at I think it was wasn't it a Fuqua entrepreneurship event, like one of the networking events in New York the first time we met?
Yes, you're correct. Yes.
Cool. Yeah.
And I know you 5 years already.
I know. I'm buzz. I'm Clayton Collins. I'm currently the CEO at HousingWire. We're the leading source of news and information for mortgage and real estate professionals. Been in this role for 3 years after acquiring the business through the search fund model. So I'll back up a little bit and tell you about my background. Went to Elon University in North Carolina for undergrad. Majored in finance, went up to New York, joined a rotational program with Citigroup, and did close to a dozen jobs over 3 short years as I started in 2007. And at the time, the city's motto was the C stands for change. And that was clearly the path that I had signed up for at Citi. So did some retail branch management, managed some large scale sales and marketing programs for retail banking and credit cards and small business for Citi's 1,000 branch network across the U.S. Was hungry to see the other side of the business, the banking business and capital markets and investment banking. And that's what brought me back to business school. Went to Duke, Fuqua, got into the investment banking recruiting path, joined RBC Capital Markets in the M&A group, and had the fortune of falling in with a few guys who were doing a lot of digital media advisory. And I found myself across the desk from a lot of really smart and motivated and creative entrepreneurs that I was honestly just kind of envious of the other side of the table. It's like, man, I would be much more excited to come into work every day if I was on the entrepreneur side, and decided it's time to start looking for a path to do that. And I learned about the idea of search funds when I was at Duke, actually through a class at Duke Law that Bill Brown was teaching called, I think it was Structuring Private Equity and Venture Capital Transactions. And then a few months later, a group that invests in search funds, who's an investor in my company today, Pacific Lake Partners, came and did a lunch and learn, and that kind of reinforced the idea of search as a path to entrepreneurship. And in my couple of years at RBC, that stuck with me. And so after 2 years of M&A advisory, made the jump to launch a search, and launched Reamar Capital in 2014. Hunted for deals for close to 20 months, and closed the HousingWire acquisition in April of 2016. So we're coming up on 3 years in a few weeks, and that is the path to where I am today.
Awesome. So let's take just a second here in a very kind of Fuqua style thing, and this video is for Duke students and for Fuqua students. Let's start with the bottom line up front. So Clayton, we'll start with you. you're speaking directly to Fuqua students here. What is the thing you want them to know? Let's assume that they can figure out like what a search fund is and whatnot. Maybe we'll cover the basics there, but what do you want them to know? And then Michael, we'll transition to you. And what do you want Duke undergrads to know about this whole thing? So Clayton, what do you want students to know?
The headline is search funds are a path to entrepreneurship. Search funds are not a career in private equity. They're not to build a portfolio of businesses. They're not a stepping stone to some other finance job. It is a path to identify, acquire, and operate a business. And what you do with that business is the exciting part, and that's where paths get like kind of diverge. There's people that stay in companies for a couple of years, have an opportunity to sell the business and move on quickly. Other people that are operating for 5 to 10 years before their business is at a scale where they want to sell or think they're ready for the next opportunity. And other entrepreneurs who use the search fund to acquire a business that they operate for their whole lives, and it might even become a multi-generational thing. So it's search funds are simply a structure and a vehicle to help aspiring entrepreneurs find a business to acquire and operate. A perfect vehicle for someone who has a skill set that's a little more aligned for a later stage in a company's life cycle. Maybe you're not the guy or gal who wants to start something from scratch and be employee number one, but know that you're really good at a certain stage in a company's life cycle, and that's where you want to step in. Or maybe that entrepreneur who just doesn't have the idea of something they want to take from a starting point. There's a lot of different ways that I think entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs should think about search funds. But I think the headline, as I started with, it's a path to entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I would just echo that, and I would sort of give a different angle to it. You are really a business owner. So this is not something you say at a cocktail party like, hi, I work 50, 60-hour days a week in private equity, or I'm in consulting. You are in the search fund in that it is a vehicle, like Clayton pointed out, but this is a way of life, right? You're running a company. People are dependent on you. You have employees to take care of. There's a human element to this that's not that there's responsibility. Couple that with your own family life, it becomes quite challenging and not for everyone. So it's not this just start a fund, buy a company, amass a portfolio. It's not mini private equity. It is totally different animal. It is entrepreneurship. It is I'm not gonna dramatize it and say it's a calling, but it is becoming a small business owner.
That's great. And I would say that one thing that both of you share, which I think will be really interesting, is that most undergrads that have a finance angle, they want to get into investment banking, they want to get into finance. Most Fuqua students that have a finance angle, they want to get into iBanking, they want to get into finance. You both have done that, and you've chosen to go down this path of search funds and acquiring a business and running it. Just talk more about that motivation in words that would help a student understand, like, hey, wait, that actually is me. Like, they're actually talking about me. I'm the kind of person that would want to do this. Michael, we'll start with you, and then Clayton will go to you.
Sure. I know Clayton can talk a little bit more about Citi and RBC. But one of the things I think stood out to me is when I worked at Goldman Sachs was something isn't quite right. And it didn't feel right in here to me. I was working at the bank and drinking the Kool-Aid, but I didn't feel like this was, it's kind of like a feeling that one has when you hit a goal and then there's that drop off. You're like, well, I'm not, it's not everything it's cracked up to be. For some people, it's the dream. So I pursued another option. I told you TradeWeb, and that was a fantastic company. I got to work with the CEO and the president, build board books, design new products, launch new products. I loved that company, and I still keep in touch with them regularly. It was only the option to join and start and build my own with Elliot at Elm Equity to via the search fund model that I truly felt finally, and you'll see shortcut to C-suite articles online, and it really is, but you get to really call the shots, and no matter how broken the company is, you still love it. It's like a child to you, and no matter how many little kinks there are. So I would say that that's been my experience. It's the only thing that ever felt right career-wise.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Clayton?
Yeah, I think my experience is launching, going out on my own to launch Reamar and acquire Housing Wire. It was an incredibly hard decision to leave Citi to go back to business school. I loved that job. I loved the people. I loved the opportunities I was continually being offered, but kind of knew that I wanted something in the long run, something a little bit different, and was making a step to prepare for that. RBC was very similar. I loved the responsibility. I loved the people. I loved the pace. You run so fast in investment banking, and that's fun when you're closing deals and getting to work with interesting people. It was another very hard decision to leave RBC to go out on my own. But I think one of the things I was realizing at that early point in my career, and I fully has been proven out, and I believe in entirely now, is I wanted to run the show. I had ideas. I wanted to execute. I wanted to run. I wanted to set my own pace. And that was something that I think that you don't often have the chance to do in larger organizations when you aren't the leader of that organization. And I kind of look back in my history, and everything's a little clearer in hindsight, but I was consistently seeking out leadership opportunities as I was growing up in the early stages of my career. And I think when you have that in your DNA, when you want to be the person leading, you need to create opportunities for yourself to be in that role. And entrepreneurship is a path I think is really hard for people who don't want to be out front and don't want to lead. But if you have that in your DNA and you want to be out front, then I can't think of a better way to exercise that part of your personality and that part of your skill set than starting or acquiring a business that you can lead. And as I look at where I am now, kind of 3 years into my role as CEO of Housing Wire, I have no damn interest in going to work for somebody again. Like this is the path. Like I can't imagine doing it any other way. So I would say I'm pretty happy with my decisions. Like Mike said though, there's ups, there are downs. Not every turn is a good one. But when you win, when you hit a goal, when you hit a benchmark, there's nothing more exciting and fulfilling than being the leader of the team that helped to achieve that. So a little bit of what's going on in my head right now.
Absolutely.
That's great. So let's say that a student is watching this and they're like, wow, that, I've heard from both these guys. That sounds like me. I want to learn more. I actually want to dive in. One thing that we talked about is, there's one portion, which is like, what is a search fund? How do you do that? And how do you raise it? Right. But then I think the other thing that you guys were saying was there's also a much bigger portion, which is after the search fund, what's next? So talk a little bit about, what's kind of some of the first steps of getting going, but also paint the bigger picture of like, what are the bigger things that people need to be aware of up front? Clayton, we'll start with you, then we'll go to Michael.
Yeah, I was telling Howie in a previous conversation that if I was to kind of describe the search fund model, and if I was on stage for an hour talking, which I'm not going to talk for an hour now, so don't worry. I would spend 5 minutes talking about search and 55 minutes talking about operating. And that's really what this is about. It's about entrepreneurship. The search fund is a very important vehicle to help people achieve that path. So a search fund, the 30-second elevator pitch is the search fund in its most traditional sense. And there's a lot of different models out there now, and Howie will share some materials after this about the different models and the ways that you can run a search fund. But the traditional sense is you set up a fund with 24 months of runway, and you go out and raise some initial money from investors that have a track record of backing entrepreneurs to pursue acquisition. And there's a growing universe of investors who believe and invest in this model. Typically, entrepreneurs are raising somewhere in the $250,000 to $500,000 range from a group of 10 to 15 investors to fund the search. And so this is 2 years of capital to identify, to research industries, identify acquisition targets, do outreach, travel, get out on the road and meet these prospective sellers face to face, pay for accounting and legal and due diligence and everything it takes to take an idea to a prospective acquisition to a closed deal. That's what that capital is for. It also helps pay for the life of the searcher. So we know that there's coming out of business school, you may have a family, at a point in your life, a small salary is something that makes this path possible. And that's another really attractive part of the search model as a way to pursue entrepreneurship. So once you've closed the search fund, you're spending your time researching industries, looking at where there's kind of looking at your own background, seeing if there's areas that you're really interested in. I spend a lot of time around services and solutions related to financial services and real estate, because that was an area where I had interest and a small degree of expertise. And then cold calling, cold emailing. I reached out to over 1,500 companies during my search process, but I know searchers who have 5x that number. It's a velocity game of trying to figure out and identify opportunities, and then taking a deal to close. So you don't have to be an M&A banker to do this. There are plenty of people you can hire and people you can lean on to walk you through an M&A process, attorneys, accountants, advisors, other Fuqua alumni who might be willing to lend a hand, and get a deal to the finish line. And from there, you are stepping into operations and running that company. So one of the big screens that's really important that searchers have to think about as they're identifying companies is looking for owner transition scenarios. This is not growth equity. We're not looking for entrepreneurs who are looking for a check so they can run faster and longer. We're looking for entrepreneurs who might be preparing for retirement. They don't have a son or daughter who is prepared to take over the business. They're at an inflection point in their life, whether it's related to health or financial reasons, or they want to travel with their spouse, but they're ready to move on from that business that they've spent their life building, and they're looking for that fresh voice, that energy, a smart, aspiring entrepreneur to come in and take the business to the next level. And if you find that right company, it's the right acquisition opportunity and something that you can step into and run as a CEO or another senior position, kind of depending on your skill set. So I guess I did spend a little more than 5 minutes talking about what the search is, but that's search. That's the very initial stage of what gets you to the step of owning and operating and managing a small to mid-sized business.
Yeah, and it's totally understandable to spend 5 minutes because it's a different idea. It's hard to compact that down to 30 seconds. So to say it right, you do actually have to describe it to some level. Michael, do you want to either add anything to the search portion of it, or do you want to jump into the operating portion of it? Whatever you want to do.
Sure. First, I agree and concur with what Clayton said. So there's no difference of opinion on that. I do want to highlight and stress that communicate with searchers. They're a little bit harder to find, but people who have failed or people who have done or would have done things differently to accelerate that search period of your search fund in the search fund life cycle, right? So before operations, that part that Clayton was addressing. We had a well-oiled machine. We had interns, we had a team of people, we had email campaigns, phone campaigns. It was very, to get to me, I mean, you had to pass certain thresholds as a business. NDA was signed. We were talking it was a very smooth process that we had designed, and we evaluated close to 10,000 companies. So it was and we picked the one that we really wanted, and we went all out. In our case, our investors were a huge part and huge selling point to the entrepreneur that we bought the business from. He initially served on the board of directors when we purchased the company, and he was very enthused and happy that it wasn't just, it was a perfect example. He didn't give it to his son. His son wasn't capable to run these two technology companies. We bought two companies that were under one roof. He was eager to pass it to Elliot and me, but more importantly, to work alongside such high caliber members of the board to help take his position. And he actually took a huge equity position going forward, because that's how confident he was. And that's one of the unique things you can do with the search fund model. You can uniquely craft deals that aren't so cookie cutter, perhaps in other scenarios. In the operational phase, it is very complicated. My partner was CEO, I was COO, so sales, marketing, operations ran through me, and finance and technology ran through him. And it was, needless to say, sleepless nights, tireless challenges, and it's still that way. For Elliot, for sure. Having running that business for close to 4 years, you can see it puts some wear and tear onto you. So you really have to love what you're doing. And also, from day one, there's tons of books out there, in the first 100 days, the first X, first Y, for first 90 days. You really want to set up a framework that, people believe in you, and people actually say, I'm going to give 110% for Michael, or I'm going to show up, not just because I want a job, and these guys are, private equity guys or finance guys or banking guys by background. I want to give my best because I believe in the broader vision that these guys have outlined. So Clayton did a single search. I did a partnership search. There's differences among that. And there's pros and cons to that. I can only talk about a partnership search. There are times I wish it was a single search, and there are times I'm sure my partner wished it was a single search. But there are times where we're like, wow, I couldn't have done this without you. And literally, the both of us complemented each other greatly, even through the operational phase of the business. I'm very grateful for that opportunity.
That's great. And so I want to give you both the opportunity to talk about the operations a little bit, and then we'll end with, what's the big idea for Duke? What's the big idea for Fuqua? If you could wave a magic wand and say, here's what Duke and Fuqua are going to do with respect to search funds, what would that be? But before that, let's just dive just a little bit more on the operations, just to give that enough time and space here. So, Michael, you kind of mentioned sales, marketing, engineering, operations, all the different kind of finance, all the different kind of pieces there are. But we were also talking about the importance of team, the importance of culture. But anyways, if you were to boil down the operations portion to what is it that you really wish somebody had told you before getting into a search fund, how would you describe that? What is it that you wish people would have told you about operations at the get-go?
I would say question everything. There was a huge issue with the data that we were getting, the billing system, the customer feedback loop. Because when you come into a company, people have certain notions, or like, this customer likes this and it's okay, don't worry about that customer, or here's our marketing, here how it's always been done. You're coming in there to change things, but not totally rock the boat, but also make it better. So you don't want to rely on just the operation as it exists. You have an even more difficult job. Your job's not safe by just coming in and keeping the status quo. You have to lift and raise the bar while also not sinking the ship. So I think that balance between making sure that you're gradually elevating standards and creating standards, and I'll maintain the difference between people are standards, right? That's what Michael Jordan will tell you. He had higher standards than anybody else in the NBA. So I think if you go in with a standard like that,
day one, people are going to think you're a little off kilter. But if you can actually gradually raise those standards, show a 5-year plan, a 3-year plan, some 1-year targets, quarterly targets, things that are achievable, things that are quick wins. I wish that was stressed to me a little bit more in the beginning. And then with operations in general, the detail. Don't let things go, but don't be a perfectionist. And, right, if directionally things are moving the right way, we understand system issues in small companies. I get it. Outputs are not necessarily direct. We spend an exorbitant amount of time wasted trying to get to that 99% accuracy with everything. So 95 plus is okay in terms of billing and feedback, because we have thousands of customers. So it was a little bit different than if you have 5-10 customers, which I wouldn't recommend buying a business with 5 or 10 customers. So that's what I wish I had a little bit more insight on.
That's great. Thank you. Clayton, what about you? What do you wish you had been told up front?
Yeah, so the search fund model kind of targets and works best with companies that are in the kind of 5 to 15 or 5 to 20 million in revenue range, and the 2 to 5 million in EBITDA range. The most acquisitions are kind of closer to that $2 million EBITDA range. And depending on the industry, margin profile, a lot of factors that might influence the number of clients you have and the number of employees you have. The business that I acquired, Housing Wire, time of acquisition, we had 15 employees. And externally, big voice and a lot of audience and a big brand. And one thing you don't necessarily realize if you haven't done this before is like 15 people is a scrappy size. You're big enough to have a sizable client list and drive some real dollars to the bottom line, but you're still small enough where everybody wears multiple hats and you don't have redundancy in positions, and you don't have departments. You have people who have very specific responsibilities. And we still joke internally that we're a 10-year-old startup. We are wearing the number of hats that you'd see in a very early stage company. We're running as fast and working as hard as what you'd see in month 9 of an angel-backed business. We are a 10-year-old startup, and what that means for operations is that you have talented people, but you're still developing them. You might not have the right people in the right role. And as you step into a business and as a search fund, a former search fund entrepreneur, you have to figure out how to get the right people in the right roles. How do you think about the positions you're going to need in 12, 24, 36 months and prepare for that? Can you afford to hire that role today? Do you need to find internal talent to fill that role for a period of time? And so thinking about, I think that the most challenging part at that stage is people, and how do you figure out how to get the right people in the right roles with the right responsibilities? I came into a business that had co-founders, and so I had 2 senior executives leaving the business in my first year of operations as we helped them transition out of the business after the acquisition. So it was huge for me to identify a new head of sales. That was one of the founders' roles. So I was fortunate to find recruit a new head of sales from the Wall Street Journal in year 1 of operations. And she's been amazing and still leading our direct sales team. Had a few internal people that were able to elevate up to other kind of department or like product leadership roles. And then just in the past month, we've recruited a chief revenue officer, which is our first C-suite hire that really aligns our sales, marketing, and product, which it sounds like a role that was really similar to what Mike was doing in his last capacity. But getting the right people in the right roles is huge. And I think that's the biggest operational challenge in the first few years after a search acquisition, and something that I think is a lot of fun too. I mean, recruiting is fun, but it's challenging. And so, I mean, I think it's one of the biggest responsibilities of an entrepreneur, and something that you can't underemphasize the importance of as you think about this path or any other entrepreneurial path.
That's great. So just the very last question here. So, Duke is a younger school. Fuqua is a younger school. We always like to be innovative, do things a little bit differently. Obviously, there are some other schools that are doing search funds really well. And we've been lucky. We've had, alums that have taken the risk and figured this out on their own, whether it's Michael Leah, Brandon Garcilaso, Anthony Lewis, Alex Brown, Michael, obviously you, Clayton, you as well. We do have a kind of a good base of people that are interested, that love Duke, that love Fuqua, that want to do more in search funds. So just hearing from you guys, and this will be the last question. Clayton, what's the big vision? Like what do you want to see Duke and Fuqua do with respect to search funds? Michael, for you, same question, and then we'll end the call there.
Yeah, I think one of Duke's biggest strengths is it's a student-led campus, and it creates a challenge, but it's also a massive opportunity. Students are learning the skills they need on campus to be successful entrepreneurs, and so the thing we are looking for as an alumni, what I'm looking for, what I hope from Duke and Fuqua right now, is to find some student leaders who really want to stand up and help drive awareness and opportunity through the search fund model across campus. So we are talking to a few search investors that are interested in coming to Duke's campus and doing presentations. And as an alumni, we're going to do what we can to support that and make sure those opportunities are there. But my vision and my hope for Duke is that we can find some consistent on-campus leadership, a few people from the class of 2020, maybe people from 19 who are still trying to figure out their move or interested in an entrepreneurial path to help drive this forward and create a consistent presence of a few people every year coming out of Fuqua's, that's a new one, Fuqua's MBA program that want to pursue the search fund path and kind of pass that opportunity down to people coming up that are joining Fuqua for the first time and might be interested in entrepreneurship through acquisition.
Very good. And Michael, take it home.
Sure. I would just say I would like for Duke to continue to be that university that's different and prides itself on being different. And one of the ways we can do that is have a early campaign while you're at Duke in the undergrad level. I could reach out to Tom Nekaba or any of the the econ professors and say, look, by the way, if the whole working for people thing doesn't really sit with you, maybe you get an MBA, maybe you pursue a career somewhere else. And there's this class that Fuqua will be teaching called Search Funds and Acquisition through Entrepreneurship. Maybe they already have that or some variation. And I want you to know about this early on so that you can prepare yourself so that you can buy a business down the road, and that hopefully Duke, in its own Duke unique way, can be able to come up with enough entrepreneurs who find that this is something that's right for them, and then more importantly, has a network of individuals like Clayton, myself, Josh, many others, and Howie's great leadership to point to us as a resource for you as you embark on this path of entrepreneurship. That's not easy, but it's something that I know that Duke students love challenges, and this is a challenge like no other.
Guys, that was amazing. Thank you so much for your energy, your time, your commitment, bringing the passion here. Love it. I'm going to end the video there, but really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Howie.
Thanks,
Thank you, Clayton.